John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, as the final day of the first version of the OTAs comes to a close today at the NovaCare Center. And there's a lot going on, John, as we look at this Darren Sproles thing. I found it funny. You know, I can't figure out how to put emojis on any of my tweets, but he figured out a way to have a lot of laughing guys crying at how hard he was laughing. I think he's trying to let people know that he is just not coming to OTAs basically because it's his prerogative and he doesn't want to be there for no reason about his contract, correct?
Well, that's what he claims, but and let me correct you real quick. You forgot the mandatory minicamp, which they didn't put out, so that's June 7th, 8th, and 9th, and that's where we're watching out for Darren Sproles and the fact that, and everyone assumes he will show up. But I will just say this about Darren Sproles and his contract. If you think about the two other people who weren't at OTAs, they have a reason. Fletcher Cox is trying to work out a significant extension. Sam Bradford was trying to work out a trade and get out of Philadelphia. So generally people who don't show up have a reason for not showing up. And there's been more than one source that have claimed Darren wants an extension, and that part of it makes sense. He's going to be 33 next month, and he's still a valuable player on this team. But let's face it, as a running back, age 33, you're on borrowed time. So it's just common sense to try to reach for as much money and an extension if you can possibly work it out. So,
yeah. Now there were some reports. There were some reports earlier in the week, John, that there were teams calling, and Doug Peterson kind of put those fires out. But do you think teams were interested in Sproles, and that the Eagles want to keep him?
Well, I think the Eagles do want to keep him. I don't think they were actively pursuing leads to trade him. I think that if you think about the logical landing spots, Miami's desperate for running back help, San Francisco with Chip Kelly. Those calls were probably made just to kind of feel it out, understanding the contract, and Darren would probably like an extension. But it's pretty clear the Eagles have their own depth issues at running back, and they can't afford to give up Darren Sproles at this point. So I don't think a trade from their perspective made a lot of sense. It certainly doesn't now. Maybe if you were desperate for getting some of the draft picks you gave up for Carson Wentz on draft night, that would have sort of spawned things. But now that we're past the draft, and they realize they're going into the 2016 season with Ryan Matthews and not much else, they need Darren Sproles.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, how can they even entertain the thought of moving him with Wendell Smallwood, a rookie, and Ryan Matthews, very injury-prone, and not much else? Who else is on that depth chart? Kenyon Barner, really. How can they even entertain the thought of moving Sproles?
Yeah, that's the point. It doesn't make a lot of sense unless you're going to, at that point, also look to bring somebody in. Whether there's people speculate that could be on the trade market in the future. We talked about Bishop Sankey in Tennessee a couple of days ago, Niall Davis in Kansas City. So there's some names out there that possibly could be available at some point. But certainly if the Eagles don't have Darren Sproles, they need somebody else. And the fact that they have him, the fact that they kind of understand he's going to be there for minicamp and the mandatory stuff. And he's a veteran guy. He probably doesn't need much work to get ready for the regular season. So I think they're just going to swallow hard and wait for him to show up.
Doug Peterson said the other day he really was talking glowingly about Wendell Smallwood, about his pass-catching abilities, and he said he's a guy that I think can be explosive. He's shown some explosiveness. He really likes the fact of how he catches the football out of the backfield. It sounds like Peterson really likes it, but, you've seen him there the last couple of days, although I don't know that he was there today. But is he a guy that you think they're counting on to be, the main, maybe not ball carrier, but the guy who touches the ball the most out of the backfield?
Well, I don't think they want that to happen. But if it has to happen, obviously They want to see if he's capable of doing it, because the reality with Ryan Matthews is you kind of understand. You want him to be out there, and his limited time last year with the football, he performed well. No one's ever questioned his talent level, but his history is what it is as far as injuries goes, and it's tough to imagine him being there. Excuse me.
John, you mentioned that mandatory minicamp. No, it's okay. You mentioned that mandatory minicamp on June 7th. Do you think Fletcher Cox will show up at that?
Yeah, he'll be there. And I have a cold, so that cold from 93.7 has finally gotten to me, so I apologize for that. But Fletcher will be there. There's no question about it. He'll be there for the mandatory stuff. And remember, he makes a lot of money even without the extension. He's on the last year of his rookie deal, so he's scheduled to make over $7 million. So worst-case scenario with Fletcher Cox, he plays out his contract, and and then the Eagles put the franchise tag on him, which is always a possibility.
John, and obviously Fletcher Cox, we all know the story. And it's funny because Andrew Brandt this morning said something in regards to Cox and Sproles. I'll let you hear what he said this morning about that situation and as it pertains to Bradford.
Fletcher Cox isn't there. Darren Sproles isn't there. We can get out of there, voluntary workouts for a few days, see if this works. It didn't work, and he's back. As for the fan base and everyone else, listen, whether they like Sam Bradford now or not, whether that changed with him going out of voluntary workouts or not, they're going to hate him if he throws a bunch of interceptions, and they're going to love him if he throws a bunch of touchdowns. I think that's the nature of the beast.
And the nature of the beast is kind of funny because we're upset with Bradford because he's very public about his situation. The other two guys, not as public, and it seems that nobody seems to care that those two guys are out. Is that an accurate read?
Yeah, it is. And part of it is just the fact that it's obviously the quarterback. And let's face it, that's the most high-profile situation, and they're always going to get the most attention, even though Fletcher's probably the best player on this team. Right. So,
well, it was a couple of years ago, too, when Kerry Williams got a lot of attention for not showing up to these things because of the sconces, and his daughter had ballet lessons or something, and he had a dentist appointment, and he just decided. He got a lot of criticism for not showing up for that, which I find it interesting, that Sproles and Cox are basically getting nothing, and I think that goes to if you're a popular player, the fans don't care as much. And if you're a player that's not that perceived to be very popular, they seem to have an opinion on you.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. But in Kerry's case, and you're right, and obviously that's not as high-profile a situation, you mentioned it all comes down to the sconces. It really does. As Fletcher said that, he's well-liked. Everyone knows how good he is, but if he said, hey, I got to work out my sconces issue at my house, he'd be getting the same criticism. So a lot of that has to do with just Kerry saying something he probably shouldn't have said. Not that there's anything all that wrong with it. You just have to realize the PR aspect of it. And Fletcher and Darren have done a good job at that. They haven't spoken out about it.
Now, Doug Peterson said, I think on Tuesday when he spoke, correct me if I'm wrong, John, you were there, that he's reached out to Fletcher Cox multiple times, but Cox has not answered him. Again, it goes funny here that, well, Bradford, why wouldn't he take the call? Why isn't Fletcher Cox taking his coach's call?
Yeah, that's a good question. He hasn't taken a lot of people's call. And actually, if you don't ask Benny Logan where Fletcher is, because he'll get very angry with you. But clearly, I mean, this is the only leverage he had, Fletcher Cox, as far as working out a long-term extension, and he's using it. And he's hardly the first who's trying to get that sort of extension in the fourth year of a 5-year contract, because remember, all those rookie deals have the fifth-year team option. And this is standard operating procedure around the league. If you haven't worked out the extension yet, you generally stay away from OTAs. So I think that more than anything is why the Eagles aren't all that concerned with it, because it's not rare. It's sort of the only leverage the players have in these types of situations, and that's why it's going the way it is going.
John, Carson Wentz, Smallwood, not at OTAs today. Any reason why they missed?
Yeah, they're at the NFLPA rookie sort of trading card shoot that they have in Los Angeles. And it's generally more skill position players than anything else, and that's why Wendell's out there because they expect him to play a lot if you look at the Eagles' depth chart. So they're out there today through Saturday. So they'll be back by next Tuesday. So basically it's just one day of missed practice for him. But, hey, anytime you're a rookie, and especially a rookie quarterback, and the Eagles want to get Carson Wentz up to speed as quick as possible. Obviously, coaches don't like that type of thing, but they understand it happens every year, and it's just part of being a rookie in the league.
How do you think Doug Peterson, or have you seen any observations of Doug Peterson directly working with Wentz so far, which is, obviously the long-term plan to groom him along?
Well, I mean, he's the head coach now, so it's not more of a hands-on. He's generally in the middle of the field watching team drills and that type of thing. And remember, the Eagles have a ton of quarterback experience, not just with Doug, but Frank Reich as the offensive coordinator, John DeFilippo as the quarterbacks coach. So they put this staff together with a lot of people who know a lot about playing quarterback in this league, with the intent on not only getting Carson Wentz or another, as we talked about time and time again, they were going to get a young quarterback at some point in this draft. It happened to be the guy they wanted. And they brought in all these ex-quarterbacks to make sure that they would have the best opportunity to make that guy, whoever it ended up being, succeed. And that's why that staff is here, and we'll see how it works out with Carson.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN. John, so how about the quarterback situation overall? Have you gotten reaction from those guys, Bradford included, about working with all the whispers, like, and all the attention that's around, and how it's been for them?
Well, I think they're used to it. Certainly Sam is as a former number one pick, so he's always had, whether it's just expectations in St. Louis or disappointment, and then coming here, all the issues with Chip Kelly, the injuries. He's used to being in the crosshairs, so to speak. Carson is, I've talked about it. He's a natural at it. And, first day of practice, there's no question the quarterback that nobody talks about really had the best understanding of what Doug Peterson wanted and the offense they're running, and that's Chase Daniel, because he's been in it so long. You could see his decision-making was just a lot sharper than the other two guys, but he's not physically as impressive. His arm strength is not as much, so that's why those two guys are a number one pick in the draft and number two pick in the draft, and Chase has been a career backup.
Yeah, and the quarterback whispers PT's referring to, really, you kind of mentioned them, Frank Reich, John DeFilippo, Doug Peterson, the fact that they got all these guys to work with all these quarterbacks. You wonder if the quarterback position is getting a lot more attention than it did under the Kelly regime. Are these quarterbacks all kind of commenting on how much tutelage they're getting with all three of these guys kind of hovering over them?
Well, Chip would say Chip is all you need. He was very, very confident in his ability. And, as much as I criticize Chip at times, you have to say one thing, and it doesn't matter who it was. Nick Foles, Sam Bradford, Mark Sanchez even, they all had career numbers under Chip Kelly.
Right.
So we always talk about his high-volume offense, which it is, but that high volume, that the yardage pile up, the points, the number of plays, it doesn't necessarily translate into efficacy in the fact of points per drive and things like that. So I think that's where the Eagles kind of got mixed up in thinking volume was better than efficiency, and I think that's why Chip's in San Francisco, and they're going in a different direction.
John McMullen, the Eagles will finish up OTAs today, and then next week they'll have a couple more, and they'll have the mandatory set coming up in June. We'll have plenty more on the Eagles as they continue through the OTAs at 97.3 ESPN.com. He is at JF McMullen on Twitter. John, enjoy the rest of the week off.
Hey, thank
no
you
more
guys.
OTAs.
Get your suffering through the poor pipes today also.
We've been passing it all around. John McMullen, everybody here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN.